stuff day to day.
Yes.
It's needed now, if anything, more than ever.
Well, right, and I think the evolution of the Fair Housing Act shows that. So, you know, the law was passed in 1968. At the time, it outlawed race, discrimination on the basis of race, national origin. It also said color, race or color, because, you know, race is not really a scientific term. It's, you know, pseudoscience, really. So race, color, whatever you want to call it, that we, you know, understand as, you know, people's outward aspect. Race, color, national origin, you know, what country you're from or your family's from, sometimes what we popularly call ethnicity. And it also outlawed discrimination on the basis of religion. In '68, it didn't outlaw sex discrimination, and so we recognized as a country the need to amend it, and in '74, sex discrimination became unlawful. And then it wasn't until 1988 that the Congress made it unlawful to discriminate because you're a family with children or expecting a child, or on the basis of disability. And so the 1988 law in making disability discrimination illegal actually even predated the Americans with Disabilities Act, which came out in '90, but said that in housing, the Fair Housing Act said that in housing, disability wouldn't be a legitimate basis for discrimination. So that evolution in and of itself showed that, you know, we had different housing demands that we began to recognize as time went on. And we are getting complaints on all of those bases today. Disability complaints, in fact, probably one of the most common complaints that we receive, in part because you know, it's still a relatively new protection. I mean,
what kind of complaints? Excuse me.
Yeah, well, with disability discrimination, we see a range. You know, we see people being denied housing outright because they have a disability. Someone just does not feel comfortable with a person with a disability.
In 2011,
that's right.
We're still having complaints that somebody doesn't want to give housing to somebody because they have a disability.
That's right. You know, we see people say, oh, well, the person's in a wheelchair, they're going to mark up my floors, or someone just has a bias, just like biases against people based on race or any other characteristic turned away. We see very commonly discrimination against persons with disabilities once they're in housing, where people with a disability are seeking an accommodation that may be reasonable and necessary because of their disability.
Could be grab bars, it could be a ramp, it could be
a
lot of different things.
Or let's say parking. We see issues of parking. Someone uses a wheelchair, or someone uses a walker, and they need a parking space close to their apartment, and a development may require that people park on a first-come, first-served basis, and this person, you know, may point out that such a parking arrangement requires that they walk a great distance to their unit, and, you know, they can slip and fall in different elements. And these are the kinds of cases that we see, some horrible situations where people have had you know, heart conditions exacerbated, where people have fallen and have gone to the hospital because they had to negotiate stairs when they had asked for units on the first floor, or they had to negotiate a parking lot. And so unlike some of the other provisions of law, under disability in the Fair Housing Act, a reasonable accommodation may be necessary for equal opportunity, and it's unlawful to deny a reasonable accommodation, because to deny it effectively would not give that person the same opportunity that others have to enjoy their unit. So it's a little different from other provisions, but it's really kind of common sense. And, you know,
and common decency.
Yes. You know, guide dogs are a very common case where a person's blind and they actually need a dog to just get about. And, you know, if you need a dog to negotiate daily activities, of course you're going to need that dog at home. You know, you come home every day.
Common sense.
Yes.
Again.
And so some place it might have a strict no animals policy and treat this animal like they're a pet, and not allow the person to live in the property with, you know, what for many people is their right hand, you know, and so very critical.
What they need to live there.
Right. What they need for equal opportunity.
common sense, common decency.
That's right.
Common sense and common decency. I wish people would remember that when they have some objections to some of these laws, and to think about why the laws are there. Sometimes the laws are onerous, and there's more and more laws and more laws, more and more laws. There are some laws that are very real,
right,
and that have very real consequences if they're not enforced correctly.
That's right. And you know, it's surprising to me too that once HUD is involved, or once the state fair housing agency is involved, that some of these cases still go on. And I don't understand why housing providers in those situations, when we're explaining the law, will still persist, and then that ends up resulting in large sanctions, and sometimes consent decree before a judge. So at the end of the day, a lot of housing providers can really mitigate those damages.
And they should work with the
early
folks.
on.
And they can go to www.hud.gov to find out what the law is.
That's right, and we post on our website the cases that we've investigated and the outcomes, and it's really to educate people, educate consumers as to what their rights are, but housing providers as well as to what their obligations are.
Absolutely. We've got about 2 minutes left, Brian. Could you tell us a little bit about Fair Housing Month celebrations? I know HUD makes as well as is appropriate to do something to honor Dr. King and to honor the passage of these laws.
Sure. Well, every year during Fair Housing Month, HUD officials join with local communities to educate people on the law, and usually it's through various ceremonies throughout the country. This year our theme is Live Free, and we're actually beginning a campaign to educate people on the Fair Housing Act, but it really means live free of discrimination, and it's a very compelling campaign which we're going to begin seeing in various communities nationwide. So we look forward to being in various communities, being here in Maryland and in the Baltimore area to celebrate the passage of this important law 43 years ago.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Wonderful. And folks can find out more information by going on your website?
That's right, HUD.gov/fairhousing, and they can always call us at 1-800-669-9777.
And we try to put every relevant thing from HUD on our website too, www.gbchrb.org.
Great.
And folks are welcome to call me at 410-453-9500, of course, about these things. We've got just a few seconds left. What would you add? What can our viewers do to help?
Well, one, they should retain that number, because anyone can be affected by housing discrimination. We're dealing with complaints from women who are facing discrimination, facing sexual harassment in their housing, lots of complaints from families with children. So anyone could be affected, and they really should share that information with others, inform them that the federal government long ago said these practices are against the law, and they should report it.
Yeah. As I tell folks, unless you use rights, you don't have rights.
That's right.
And if you just sit there, and if you take it, and if you say, oh, it's too much of a hassle, call up HUD.
Yes.
Go on the website, call the Maryland Commission on Human Relations, do something about it.
It's absolutely right. And we have the authority also to initiate our own investigations. So if someone doesn't want to file, like they don't want to personally be known, we do testing, we have other methods of uncovering discrimination. So we appreciate any information about housing discrimination. It's against the law, just like many other practices are against the law. People need to report it and allow the tax-paid federal government to address it.
Amen. 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 Thank you so much.
Sure.
Unfortunately, we're about out of time. For Neighborhood Beat, we're about out of time now. I want to thank our guest, Mr. Brian Green, General Deputy Assistant Secretary for Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you for being our guest today.
It's been great.
And keep up your good work for all of us.
I appreciate it.
For Neighborhood Beat, I want to thank you for tuning in. Let's try to be a good neighbor out there in all of our neighborhoods, and we'll see you next time.